Okay, good morning. My name's Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Laguna Hills Nursery on a Saturday morning. And today's class is on one of the most popular fruits that we grow, or that people want to eat, and that would be peaches, nectarines, and some of their hybrids. Here it's beginning of February. We've got some of the trees already starting to bloom, which for any other part of the country would be rather early or too early, because there can be still, in fact, even here, occasionally it's too early because there can be a bad frost up until, in this area, up until March. There can be a bad frost that can cause some damage to the flowers, although that hasn't happened to us for probably 40 years. 30 years. It's been 30 years since we've had a really nasty frost. So now peaches and nectarines both need chill. If we don't get the winter they want, they don't bloom, the flower buds don't develop, they don't even leaf out at the right time. They'll leaf out sometime in summer. So we need trees that don't need too much chill, because our area, according to the chill charts, we get somewhere between 200 and 300 hours of chill every winter. Now, it goes up and down. I mean, we've had early 80s winters with hardly any chill, maybe 200 hours. And then the late 80s, we had winters with 500 hours of chill. It was crazy, 400, 500 hours of chill. And it's gradually gone down, hit its low spot probably 10 years ago. We're getting about 100 hours of chill. And now we're back up to maybe 300 hours. We'll see what happens this year. Right now, we had a heat wave last week, which lowered the chill below 100 hours. And this week it's been rather cool, not above 59 degrees apparently. And that'll get our chill back well over 100 hours, maybe 150 or close to 200. We have a cool week. That'll get us about 100 hours of chill. And if we have 2 or 3 cool weeks in a row, we'll get to 300 hours. So we'll see what happens this year. Every year it's different. We just don't know what's going to happen. Although we've been trending closer to 300 hours than we had, say, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. We were well less than 300. So we'll see what happens. So peaches and nectarines, not too picky about soil quality. Most of them can handle clay and fairly soggy soils without too much trouble. There are different rootstocks that are available on these. We tend to go with one called Nemagard, which is more drought tolerant. So the other rootstock out there that you can get these trees on, or you can order them on, is Citation, which loves wet clay. The problem we have is that droughts are used, if you have wet clay, you can do something about it. You can just make a little hill and put them on a hill so it doesn't stay so wet. You can add sand to the soil. When we have drought and you turn the water down, then the other rootstock tends to fail. And we see a lot of death on plants on Citation rootstocks during a prolonged drought. So we prefer the Nemagard and the other, quote, standard rootstocks over the Citation, which again likes wet. And Citation may handle soil with too much compost in it too. So we do not recommend growing plants in compost. If you've seen our soil videos, real dirt is better than ground up dead trees in the ground. It tends to make them rot, although it seems like the Citation rootstock is also rot resistant against that. So, okay, bare root plants. So this is one of what we look for. So this is a bare root peach tree, a really nice bare root peach tree, a nice thick trunk, nice set of branches. The graft isn't the straightest in the world, but it's not bad. And generally, this is a good size and branching structure to go ahead and just put in the ground. So the soil level is usually they grafted these 4 inches above the ground. So this would be about the ground level. But you've got from here all the way up to here. I've done them anywhere along those lines, and seems to be no problem. Peaches aren't real sensitive. Peaches, nectarines aren't real sensitive to soil level. Now, in the old days, when we got bare root peach trees, and occasionally we still get them like this, it just looked like a fishing pole, no side branching at all. And if you get a tree with no side branching, in the old days, we would tell people cut it down to where you want your branching to begin, which would often be in an orchard. It'd be about knee height. In your home, you may not want things knee height, maybe waist height. So you'd cut the tree after you plant it, you cut it down to where you want the branching to start. This one's got branching starting from about knee height. So there's no need to really prune it. It's got nice branching. So that you can just go with that. Now here's a different bare root tree. When they grow these bare root trees, they're about 4 inches apart, anywhere between 4 and 6 inches apart in the field. We can tell because the occasion we'll get 2 stuck together, and they'd be, the roots would be intertwined, and they'd be about that far apart. So in the field, they grow them real close together, and you get some big ones, some small ones. So they grade them before they send them to us. Here's one that developed 3 upright trunks. Nothing really wrong with that. Peaches and nectarines both are so vigorous that sometimes the growers would rather work with multiple trunks or uprights. You can say upright main, well, call them trunks. Because if they just have one, sometimes the side growth is too vigorous and they don't fruit well. So if you have more than one trunk, if the tree made more than one trunk, in fact, this one you can say even that one's another one, 4 upright trunks, then go with, I would say don't cut them off, just go with it. And the branches, you can just say, well, this is one really thick trunk. And then all the branches that go sideways from there. So the branches that grow more horizontal are the ones that flower and fruit the best. The ones that grow straight up don't fruit very well. So you want, ideally on a lot of fruit trees, you only want one trunk going up and everything else going horizontal. But the problem with peaches and nectarine is sometimes they're so vigorous that all these branches that they're making want to become trunks, and you just have to let them. They want to head upwards. They don't just grow a nice side branch like this. This would be considered a good fruiting branch here. And this one's a good fruiting branch here too. It's got a lot of flower buds already on it. So the branches on what you want is you want side horizontal, fairly horizontal. It doesn't have to be perfect horizontal. This is okay. But branches that naturally grow 1 to 2 foot long are just loaded with flower buds. The ones that are kind of short may not make the best quality fruit, but they often still fruit. But ideally, you want 1 to 2 foot branches going sideways. So this one, hopefully, what you're hoping for is that the upright trunks will then make not so vigorous branches that go sideways in all directions, 1 to 2 foot out. And if you're nervous about it, like this one doesn't have anything growing right now, although these are all buds that can make side branches, you can cut it a little bit shorter to start and force those branches out, and then one will head upwards again. But you might leave it alone until summer and see. A lot of these will open up and start growing sideways on their own. Peaches and nectarines both are programmed to grow spring and summer. So if it didn't do what you wanted by the end of spring, you can cut this short again and force them to go sideways to get those nice side branching. Now, we mentioned a few weeks ago, if you want to be perfect about it, you would face the dog leg on the graft away from the sun so the sun can't hit it, because this area of the tree is the most subject to sunburning of any part of the tree. Generally, it doesn't, you don't have to worry about that, but in case you want to be perfect, you do that. Now, the other thing to watch for is if the tree is a little one-sided. Like on this particular tree, most of the branching goes forward this way. Some this way. Well, because the trees are placed side by side this direction, more branches going outwards than they going this way or this way. But if, you know, this side has the least amount of branches, and they're smaller. What you might want to do is face that toward the south, so the more sunlight comes on this side, get this side to even up. So if you get one that's real uneven, face the side toward the sun that needs to have more branching, and hopefully they'll do what we want them to do. Put a lot of branching on the sunny side of the tree. So we did mention weeks ago that when you plant bare root, you know, you cut off obviously broken roots, or badly, if they're just slightly cracked, you can leave them on. But if they're dangling, a lot of times I shake the tree and you can see roots just swinging around. You know, those are almost broken off, and you can just remove those, and then make a hole big enough to get these roots in the ground, and just put the native soil around them. They say in orchards, when they're planting orchards, two guys are digging the hole. They take about 30 seconds to dig the hole. They put the tree in there, they cover it up, and off away they go to the next tree. They have thousands to plant that day, so they don't take much time. And if the soil is not really wet, and we haven't had but, what, a ½ inch of rain this year, so then watered good. Now, we do recommend the first watering that you hold the trunk straight as the soil settles, as the water soaks in. Because occasionally what happens is when the soil is settling, the first watering, it'll lean and you can't get it straight again. So what I would always recommend is on the first watering when you plant a bare root, hold the trunk straight so the soil will settle without making the tree lean one direction more. Now, in theory, when the soil is still wet, you can pull the tree straight and tap it real good, and the soil should vibrate around the roots and get it straight. But it's easier to do it just by holding the tree straight first and make sure the soil settles after that first watering. And then after you get it wet once, unless you've got a lot of competition from evergreen plants in the area, you shouldn't have to water again until it starts to bloom. And even then, they don't use a whole lot of water till they'll get their leaves out. Most of our bare root trees aren't quite this big. Most of them are more this size, and there are some that are much smaller. Now, orchards, because they buy them by the thousands, they always tell other orchard owners, you know, you don't really want to buy trees thicker than a pencil. Which means that the trees they're buying are not much thicker than this upright branch here. And, you know, we've grown enough of those. I have a few specimens out there that are about 3/8 of an inch trunk. And those will be 8 foot tall by the end of the year. 8 foot tall, 5 foot wide. So all these trees grow very quickly. This is one of last year's bare roots that we potted up, and this was probably a ½ inch trunk. Now it's Yeah, that's considered 5/8 to 3/4 inch now. But to keep these in this 5-gallon bucket, we had to prune it twice last year. Once in July, we knocked off about 3 foot, and then once again in September, we knocked off another 3 foot. Otherwise, it would be in the ground and a tree this size already. Okay. Generally on peaches and nectarines, it is very important to treat them in winter. Now, all our bare roots have already been treated twice with some kind of spray to prevent peach leaf curl. So nectarines and peaches and nectaplums all can get peach leaf curl. It's a fungus that attacks the leaf buds, not the flower buds, but the leaf buds, if we have any significant rain. So this year, in theory, we shouldn't see any peach leaf curl. Of course, we've got a couple more months of rainy season left. And if we get 5 inches of rain in a few weeks, then spray it. Spray it. Now, these, again, the stuff we're selling has already been sprayed. We went ahead and sprayed this one around New Year's Day with this product. So you just spray all the buds on the tree, and that'll help prevent peach leaf curl. Now, peach leaf curl disease is not a deadly disease, but it does, all the new leaves that come out on some branches look like they're on fire, or they look really angry. They're all bubbly. Instead of being smooth green leaves, they come out bubbly, reddish, like they've got blisters all over them. And those leaves don't live very long. The trees will shed them off before summer and make new leaves that are healthy looking. Well, it wasted a lot of energy on those leaves that it had to discard. So that's what we're trying to prevent, because the tree's wasting a lot of its energy making another set of leaves that are more healthy. So they said the best time to spray, the most effective time, is when you see bud color. So right at this stage is when that's the best time to spray it for peach leaf curl, right when the buds are starting to show color. Once it's in bloom, it's too late. And you can't do anything till the next winter again. If you spray it while it's totally dormant, it's fine. It seems to be fine. That's when most people do it. But they say in commercial orchards, every 5 inches of rain, they'll be out there again spraying the trees, because it's so detrimental to the quality of the fruit. And of course, they're really, they're doing this for a living, so they don't hesitate. They just go out there and spray. Now, we used to have a better spray on the market than this, but it was taken off. EPA says it's too dangerous for homeowners to handle. It was called lime sulfur. And even though it was not harmful to get sprayed by it, it's an corrosive material that if it gets in your eyes, then it can do permanent eye damage. So if you accidentally poured it, or were pouring it and it splashed in your face, there can be problems. So they took that off the market, but that used to be our best product. Yes.
Questions. I still have some lime sulfur in my cupboard, preferable to use. I'll just be really careful.
Yeah, lime sulfur. Well, if the lime sulfur hasn't crystallized in there, then you're fine. Yeah.
And I know that if you get the curly leaves, one is that they'll spread to others. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's good.
Okay, that's my. Oh, it is. Okay, that those leaves the fungus can spread to other leaves, so that you should pick them as quickly as possible. Is that not true? And does it save some of the energy if you pick them the minute you see it, so that it doesn't
seem to spread after the leaves are open?
Okay.
It's the peach leaf curl disease is a disease that needs the rain to infect the buds. I mean, if it continues to rain, yeah, in theory you can keep spreading, but in generally it's mainly a winter rainy thing. Yeah. And once the leaves start growing, you can't do anything about it until the next year. So,
I always have a-
Yes, here. So that's the most important thing to do on all peach and nectarine trees and the Nectaplum tree. Now, 40 years ago, we didn't have any worms in our peaches and our nectarines. But, 40 years ago, we didn't grow many peaches in Southern California because we didn't think they would grow here. And over the years, they've developed and found cultivars or varieties of peaches, nectarines that do well. So over the years, we've had more and more peaches. And starting around 1990, the worms that get into peaches and nectarines made it down to Southern California, and from that point on, we've had to treat them. Now, 40 years ago, we didn't have an organic spray to do this with. Now we do. So it's much better now than before. So we have a product called Spinosad. Both of these, there's a dozen companies that have products containing Spinosad. Bonide makes Captain Jack's, which is Spinosad. Fertilome makes Spinosad soap. Monterey makes Monterey Garden Spray, which is Spinosad. Ortho makes their own brand of Spinosad. But Spinosad is an ingredient made by a bacteria that was found in a rum distillery. And so they considered that most people have already drank this stuff. And it's also a very important chemical in veterinary medicine. So it can kill fleas and things. In fact, my dog's flea tablet with Spinosad, and you feed the dog the Spinosad, and it kills all the fleas on the outside of its body. So it's pretty potent stuff, but safe for around mammals. But if you spray it, so the worm we're dealing with is oriental fruit moth. There's a close related insect called peach twig girdler. And they look identical. They do much of the same damage, but the difference is this one is harder to know you've got it because so there's 5 generations a year. The 3rd generation is usually the one that goes into the fruit. Now, the peach twig girdler is easier to see when it's in the fruit because it goes through the skin of the fruit. So you see a hole in your peach or nectarine. We don't see that. The oriental fruit moth goes into the fruit through the fruit stem. And when you pick the fruit, if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't notice that there's a hole into the fruit where the fruit stem was attached. And then you eat the peach or nectarine and there's a worm at the pit. So this one, you can see this one is harder to see. And it's the 3rd generation. It's the fruit that ripens late June through early August that gets the worms. There are peaches, nectarines that ripen before late June, and they don't seem to ever get this bug because it's the 3rd generation that's going into the fruit. The 1st and 2nd generations feed on the tree, and the 4th and 5th feed on the tree. So now, there's some places in Orange County that still don't have this bug, so you may be able to grow your tree for years without ever seeing it, but most people have it. The 1st generation, so it's an interesting insect in that it actually overwinters. Most insects that overwinter hibernate either as an adult hiding or as a pupa hidden or as an egg. But this critter overwinters as a hibernating caterpillar. And they are in the branches of the trees themselves. Now, I don't see anything on this tree that looks like an overwintering insect. but usually the area is swollen and leaking sap. So the most common area, because they feed on the ends of branches, are the branch tips. We cut off a lot of the branch tips earlier in the fall, so I don't see any swollen branch tips or leaking sap. If you cut all those off, you'll get that first generation. And sometimes where two branches meet, you'll see a swollen area that's leaking sap. And I don't see that on this tree at all, so there doesn't appear to be anything on here. Now, we do spray our nursery with spinosad quite often, so we did a good job of controlling it. But the first generation usually wakes up from their hibernation and feeds on the flower petals. So you can spray them when they're in bloom. Don't spray them when bees are actively on there. If you spray a bee, you'll kill it. Once the spray dries, it doesn't hurt the bees anymore. But you can spray at that time, catch the first generation. What they do so the tree starts growing leaves. In the second generation, the moths fly around and lay eggs at the tips of the new growth. And the larvae burrow into the ends of the stems because it's so tender and sweet. And the ends of each new growth just browns out and the leaves kind of wither, and they call that flagging of the new growth. So you know there's a worm in there. You can just cut those off, or you can spray the tree. And keep doing that until you don't see any more of that flagging of the new growth. And then the third generation goes into the fruit. The fourth and fifth generations just do cause the flagging at the end of the branches again. So just catch them before they get into the fruit. And usually that's around June.
So I noticed that on our tree, there's leaking sap on the bottom. So does that mean that there's...
No, if you have sap leaking out the base of the tree, and that's actually kind of common on stone fruit trees, that's not anything to worry about.
Okay.
So it's called gummosis. You can have sap coming out of different places in a tree. That's it can either be due to a sudden change in moisture in the ground or in the atmosphere. It can be due to a damage, just someone kicked it or someone hit it with a string trimmer and it's leaking sap. It can be a borer, but if it's a boring insect of another type of bigger boring beetle, you'd see the frass or the sawdust like poop coming out of the hole too. But generally it's usually just changes in the weather or the moisture in the area. And you can get big gobs of sap coming out. They say if they're clear and they don't smell, it can be clear amber colored. Usually it's amber colored. Then there's nothing wrong. If it's gooey and it smells terrible, then you've got a sap infection, which you can't do anything about. You just leave it alone. If the tree dies, it dies. If it lives, it lives. Trees can get sap infections where the tree fights off the infection by raising the pressure. I don't know if they do that. They know they're doing that, but they raise the internal pressure and forces the disease out. So peaches and nectarines don't usually get that. So
So if we have a year of heavy May, gray, June gloom, I'm assuming it's worse with this, or it doesn't matter. You still get it regardless. If we
the
get
sap flow?
no, I'm more all the worms and the bugs and things.
No, you get the worms
Anyway.
any kind of weather.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah. So spinosad again is the best stuff to spray this with. Spinosad lasts 2 weeks on the tree. I think on peaches nectarines they have you not spray it within 3 or 4 days of picking. It's on the label. So on other fruits like tomatoes, they say you can spray it the same day you eat it or the day before you eat it. On herbs, lettuce, spray before the day you eat it. But on peaches nectarines, they want you to wait a few days. Okay, so that's the main bug that we suffer from is the oil fruit moth. Occasionally we'll get spider mites on them. Occasionally we'll get powdery mildew on them. The last few years have been bad mildew years. I mean, I grew peaches for 30 years before I saw mildew on them. And this last 2 years, we've had mildew on the leaves in the summer from the humidity and the cloudy weather. And the oil sprays control spider mites as well as you can, and they also control mildew as well as we can. And it's considered organic too. So there's different oils. There's organic source oils. This is mineral source oil, but because they evaporate within hours, they consider them for you. They're fine for use in organic situations in organic orchards. If you mix this with baking soda, I'll just write down. When we use this particular oil, which is a mineral oil, we use it at, let's see, the oil, 4 tablespoons per gallon of water. And in that same water, we'll add 1 tablespoon of baking soda. And that also helps keep the mildew away. But the oil does a good job on a lot of little bugs like spider mites, like scale. And that's about it. That's all the products we use. This is considered organic also. I don't think this used to be considered organic, but because they've taken all the organics, well, there's no organic things that really control peach leaf curl well, so they just say, okay, that's good. I guess because copper and lime can be found in nature in that form, they consider it to be a natural pesticide. So, and because it's something that people have used for a couple hundred years, it's been in use for that same thing for a couple hundred years. Now, the other thing you have to watch out on when they're this time of year is, so they're pretty good at attracting bees, so no problem. They usually on peaches and nectarines both, you get too much fruit set. So every single flower can start making a little fruit. Well, you notice that this one branch, there's over 10 flower buds on it. There's no way this branch can make 10 fruit. There's just no way. If you don't thin it out, you'll get fruit that's a little bigger than you might make it to golf ball size, and they're not very good. So when the fruit's about the size of your thumbnail, because at that point, a lot of peaches, nectarines, they'll abort a lot of the flowers and fruit that start forming, and there are some varieties that are self-aborting, so you don't have to thin them out. But most of the peaches, nectarines, you've got to thin them so that a branch like this, 1 fruit. Most of these branches are pretty short. A couple of them you can probably hold 2 fruit. So they tell you about 8 inches between fruit on the branch if you want better quality fruit. Otherwise, you get all these little tiny things that don't have much taste. So unfortunately, you got to go out there, say 2 or 3 weeks after the bloom's over, and cut off 80 to 90% of your crop. Yeah. And some people just can't do it. And they but pick them off. Pick off all those extra fruit to make the ones you have left better quality. I don't know how they do this in orchards. I think there are some sprays they have that help the tree self-abort. Okay, so that's fruit thinning. Fertilizer-wise, they're not real heavy fertilizer users. We usually fertilize them. Organics are better in the ground when they bloom, but they're just not heavy feeders. In fact, you've got to be careful with nectarines. Nectarines are highly subject to brown rot. So brown rot occurs as your nectarines are ripening, the skin is rotting. It is a disease, but it's more, the plants that are more susceptible have been fertilized too heavily. And too much nitrogen in the plant system, the skin doesn't mature, stays too juvenile-ish, and it gets that brown rot real easy as it's ripening. So we saw a study that UC Davis did, and they said, well, all the orchard can do is not fertilize, but it took 3 years to get the fertilizer level in the plant down low enough so they would stop rotting when they were ripening. So don't overdo the fertilizer on nectarines. Peaches, not so much. We don't seem to have that much trouble, but nectarines always have that trouble. The other problem that nectarines have is thrips in the flowers. So when they're blooming, and this is a nectarine, it is nice, even if you don't have the worms, to spray them when they're blooming with one of the spinosad products. So there is a bug called the flower thrip, and it goes into the flowers and damages the embryo inside the flower of the nectarine. So as the nectarine develops, the skin of the fruit is scarred. Now, it can be just a simple scar that doesn't bother you. They kind of look like Nike swooshes going across the fruit. But if it's severely scarred, it's oozing sap and it's totally just terrible looking. And you look at the fruit and you say, I don't want to eat that. Even though it's edible, you just don't want to eat it. It looks horrible. So nectarines, pretty much you've got to spray them when they're blooming. Once a week while they're blooming, hit the flowers. Try not to hit any bees to keep that out of the fruit. So nectarines need more spraying than peaches do. They need that one extra spray, although this does double duty. It can kill the first generation of the oriental fruit moth worms. Now, if you have a neighbor that doesn't spray, they have peach nectarine trees and they're not treating them, then you have to spray more than just once to control that oriental fruit moth. We don't have to spray many of their fruit trees for either one of those things. I mean, I've only eaten one apricot over all the years with a oriental fruit moth larva in it, or found one that had it in there. And not many plums either. 1 or 2 plums get the oriental fruit moth, but it's mainly peaches and nectarines that ripen in summer. The ones that ripen in spring don't seem to get it. Any questions on culture? Water-wise, just like anything else, they want them to be amply wet, especially when they're blooming and sizing their fruit. And that means you want the soil to be wet 1 foot deep. And the only way to check that, if you get a stick, like a piece of rebar, if you can push in the ground where you water the tree about 1 foot deep, you're fine. If you can't water it that deep, you're running dry. The fruit can turn out small, and occasionally you can make them split. So if they get too dry, they shrink too much, and then you water it and they just blow up. So watch the watering. It's better to keep them, just keep them on the wet side while the fruit's growing. Once you harvest the fruit, you can really back off on the water. Okay, let's go over the varieties of trees that we sell. Now, there's quite a few peaches that actually can fruit in our area, but a lot of them are better inland, like in the desert areas or in Florida, or it's hot in the spring. So the problem we have here is our springs, May and June can be totally cloudy. And if there's no sun, the fruit has no flavor. It's like they said the last 4 days before the fruit is picked make the biggest difference on flavor. If it's sunny those last 4 days, you got a good fruit. If it's cloudy those last 4 days, you got a bland fruit. And the problem with peaches and nectarines both is they have no hang time. So there's like a 3-day window when they're at their best. And you don't want to pick them hard, which the stores do, because they're not ready yet. They don't have their sweetness yet. You want to pick them when they just start to give. And there's only a 3-day window for you. After that, they fall on the ground and they're mushy. So it's tough. It's got to be ripening during sunny weather. Now, the peach trees that have the lowest chill wake up early, and most of the ones that wake up early also ripen early. So that's the problem we have, is you need a low chill peach that can handle our mild climate, but you don't want it to ripen early. Because a lot of them, like this thing's already in bloom. In fact, we had some customers tell us, their peach was in bloom in December. We had a fairly cool December, and we've seen in the past where peach trees would be blooming in December, and that fruit would ripen in April. Now, April sometimes is sunnier than May and June, so sometimes you get away with it. But a lot of the stuff from Florida and a lot of stuff that they grow in Arizona ripens around April because it gets too hot in those areas. Well, especially Arizona, it gets too hot in July, the fruit will be all burned up. So in the desert areas, they like fruit, and ideally the fruit ripens in spring rather than in summer. But for us, that can be a problem. Now, what we'll do is we'll go over the peaches first by their chill. So you know which ones. So the lower the chill they need, the most likely they are to fruit every year you have them. If the chill requirement is higher, then they'll miss a lot of years because some winters we don't get as much chill. So the one that seems to be the lowest of all the peaches we sell, Saucy Swirl, which is a flat peach, somewhat like donut, with it's got a little bit of pink inside. Pink, so they call it Saucy Swirl because there's a little bit of pink swirling around. Of course, and it's a type of, they call it a donut peach or one of the flat peaches. The neat thing about a flat peach is because the seed is so close to both ends, if you want a donut, you can just push out the seed and you've got a donut of flesh to eat. But Saucy Swirl, which probably needs less than 200 hours of chill, ripens in mid-May. Well, put mid to late May. So you're going to get fruit pretty much every year on this tree, but some years you may not get much. 2 years ago would have been a disaster. Last year it wasn't quite as cloudy as the year before. We had a tree in a 15-gallon. I didn't even mention that. We had a tree in a 15-gallon bucket at the nursery and had about 50 fruit on it. And the first week we picked the fruit that was ripe the first week, totally bland. But the last week the sun came out, it was actually not bad. It was pretty good. So it's not like you're not going to get any good fruit ever on the early ones, but it's hit or miss. And the further inland you live, if you're back in Trabuco Canyon, you get less of the June gloom. If you're in Riverside, you wouldn't have to worry at all. It'd be a perfect fruit for that area. So Chino, Riverside, wonderful fruit. Now it is generally the early peaches are considered lower quality than the late peaches. So the late peaches, generally with full sun, summer heat, are usually the best peaches we can grow. But the early peaches, nice to get it. So I didn't mention, when we grow them in containers, and they do fairly well in containers, use our top potting soil, which is a permanent potting soil. And again, the only one I can think of on the market. Or pure sand. Sand's a good potting soil. In a bucket like this, you can grow a plant maybe this wide and this tall and get, 20 to 50, 60 fruit on it. In a size like this, which is the size of a half barrel or 25 gallons, you can probably get 50 to 100 fruit in a size like that, and since most peaches nectarines ripen in 3 weeks, that may be all you need. Container wise, they don't live as long. There's not as much root space. So figure, 5 years to 10 years max in a bigger container. Now, I didn't mention this either. Peaches and nectarines are short-lived fruit trees. The shortest lived that we probably think of as a tree, as a permanent tree. In fact, I got to go back and show you some pruning techniques. Okay. So if you don't prune them at all, peaches can live a couple hundred years. Peaches and nectarines do not seal wounds well. So all the pruning we do on these trees to make them more productive for us hurts them. It shortens their life. In peach orchards now, using statistics, because they used to leave them in the orchards for 20 years because they're still making peaches. Now they know that after about 13 years in the field, the peach production has gone down enough that it's worthwhile to remove them and plant something else. So in commercial orchards, 13 years is about it, because they're already going downhill after 10 apparently. So the first 10 years, and the first year's crop is not much. Second year you can do pretty well though. But by the 10th year, they're already starting to go downhill. And by the 13th, statistically, it's not worth it. Although for homeowner, you probably still get enough peaches till they're 20. Because you don't need 500 peaches in 3 weeks. And so we do recommend you keep your trees, maybe 5 foot wide and maybe 8 foot tall, whether or not they're in pots or in the ground, to limit your production to about 100 or so. I don't know that you can really use much more than that, because in the old days, when peach trees were allowed to grow 15 foot across and 10 foot tall, you're talking 400, 500 pieces of fruit. But if you keep them smaller, at my last house, we kept our average peach tree and nectarine tree to about this big, but we had about 10, a combination of 10 peaches nectarines, and the earliest ones ripen in May, the last ones ripen in August. So that's a better thing, is to keep them small and keep them going. Now I should mention that orchards trim differently than most homeowners do. So on any peach tree, the branch that grows last year will fruit this year. So this tree, part of this tree, and this part here are from the year before last, the year before last. This is what grew last year. This piece here, this piece here, these pieces here, this piece here. Actually, it looks like this entire branch grew last year also. But on this branch, this was from 2 years ago, and these side branches were what grew last year. So that's where the fruit forms. And you'll get a lot of short branches unless you do a lot of heavier pruning. So what they do in orchards is that a branch like this they would just cut it short, totally off in the winter, because nothing on here is going to make a huge, the bigger, commercially, the bigger the fruit, the better, more money you make. So they don't want short branch fruits forming on short branches all. They would just cut this short, let it regrow this coming year. But a longer branch that was between 1 and 2 feet, like this one's about a foot long, they would keep that branch and let it fruit. But anything that was too long and no flower buds, if they're too long, often there's no flower buds on it, they would cut it short to the main upright, to make it regrow and hopefully be the right length for the next year's crop. So they'd be pruning, they want the fruiting branches to be about a foot apart, up and down the trunk facing each direction, a foot apart. And they'd cut anything else that they didn't want, they'd cut it short and let it regrow without fruit on it. So that's what orchards do. It's a lot of work. If you want your best, biggest peaches, best tasting fruit possible, that's what you do. I never did that when I had my own backyard. I just said, okay, I can see the flower buds. If the branches are overlapping like this, maybe I'd cut that off. So you can say, okay, these two are overlapping. Let's just get rid of one of those. Here's some more branches overlapping. We'll get rid of, say, this one. And that's fine. That's good enough. I mean, Dave Wilson likes to make it easy for homeowners. They just say, prune them all summer long. As long as you still have leaves, if you're pruning for height and size control, you'll get flowers for every leaf can make a flower, and you get fruit the next year, no matter what shape you make it. But commercial trees are done differently. They'll have designated upright branches, one either, in Canada they just work with one. The growing season's only 4 months there, so they just work with one trunk going straight up. In California, they often work with 2 to 4 trunks going upright and everything else horizontal off of those trunks. I mean, this is fairly horizontal, but if you hold them down, they actually act more like fruiting branches. And they'll try to space them out every foot up one side of that, every foot up this side on this side, on all 4 sides, and space them about a foot apart, and cut everything else short to regrow and hopefully fruit for the next year. So they'll alternate branches. But that's the goal, is to have a good size branch with flower buds on it to get your best quality fruit. But this doesn't bother me. If you get a small fruit on a short branch, it still tastes pretty good. But if you're an orchard commercial guy, you want them to be all big. Okay, so that's pruning in detail, but all that pruning shortens their life. So if you don't prune at all, then you get this big tree that you can't reach the fruit on. Okay, so back to the peaches. Saucy Swirl is probably the lowest chill, the most reliable, but early. Tropic Snow. So this is a white flesh. Tropic Snow, you can tell by the name, that's a white, more of a conventional peach. Seems to be less than 200 hours also. But it ripens mid to late June. So this one usually hits the sunny weather. I grew this for like 20 years ago. Okay, that's a pretty good peach. Every year I get fruit, and every year it's pretty darn good because it's fairly warm and sunny at that time. There's Eva's Pride. This is a yellow fruit. It's less than 200 hours. Now, the book says Eva's Pride ripens late June to early July, but at my house, it's like late May through early June. So I'm not sure, because it ripens apparently in Modesto, California, where Dave Wilson is closer to, mid to late June into early July. But at my house, I remember eating it when it was raining. And that had to be May. It doesn't rain after May. So I would tell you late May to early June. I mean, the ripening times here and up north seem to be way off sometimes. But it is considered the best quality of the early yellow peaches. So, but yeah, it can be quite early. But, you know, these three, I don't think will ever miss. They'll always make fruit. So if you wanted fruit, those three will never miss. Then we got Mid-Pride. And Mid-Pride is early July, well, late June through, I would say, mid-July. And it's around 250 hours. And it's yellow. And that may be one of the best compromised peaches you can get because it rarely misses. It has missed a few times when we had those really bad winters. I mean, these things never miss, it seems. But this one has missed occasionally, but not often. 90% of the years, you'll get a good crop on that. I gave that tree to my neighbor, and he says, boy, this is an awful good peach. It's everything I look for in a peach. So Mid-Pride is pretty darn good fruit. Then there's August Pride, which is less than 300, but not by much. And it's late July to up until mid-August. And it's yellow. All the Pride peaches are yellow. There's a May Pride that can grow here too, but again, it's May. So we don't bother with that one. But August Pride is one of the best peaches that will make fruit. I would say 3/4 of the years you'll have a big crop. I don't know, August Pride, even though we don't get the chill for it occasionally, it's never acted bad. So what I mean by that is August Pride will always wake up in spring and make a few peaches, even on those really nasty hot winters we had 10 years ago. It would still wake up in the spring, bloom, and make a few fruit. It wouldn't blank on us. So a lot of people swear this is the best peach we grow, not Mid-Pride, but the August Pride, because it is ripening during the prime time for peaches. And then we have Red Baron, which is around 300, well, I would say a little over 300 hours. And it is almost the same time, I would say late July to early August. I mean, at my house, some years August Pride would bloom before Red Baron because we got our chill later, and some years Red Baron would ripen before August Pride because we had more chill that year. This one would wake up at the same time and ripen a little bit earlier. But Red Baron's the best peach we've ever eaten. But it missed about 8 years. Well, not that many, 5 years, 2014 up until about 2020. It wasn't, maybe 2017, it wasn't producing at all. It wasn't blooming. And what it would do is it wouldn't wake up in the spring. It would start waking up in August, not make any fruit, barely survive the year with a few leaves on each branch. So Red Baron, you know, like a lot of plants that don't get any chill, they just don't wake up in the spring. So that's more scary. Now, again, if you live along the Santa Ana River, you got no problem with chill. Or if you live in any canyon or by any riverbed or even a drain ditch in Orange County, your chances with Red Baron are a lot better. I have a friend who lives a block off the Santa Ana River in Anaheim, and they didn't have any problem with chill there, even during the hot winters. They still got these things to bloom. Now, Red Baron, we heard about this in the 1980s by the LA Times garden writer. He was promoting this for his home. He said his home in Santa Monica, it was doing wonderful. And it's got the best bloom he's ever seen on a tree. So we started getting them in. And Red Baron, the flowers last forever on it. They're double flowers and they're red. I mean, they're not red, but they're red. They're that dark pink, like a carnation red. I mean, the tree looks like a giant carnation. And it seems to stay in color for 6 weeks. That's the weird thing. The flowers last forever. Going, there's no way this can be a fruit tree. The flowers are just too good on it. And then it makes the best peaches we've ever eaten. So Red Baron has its attributes. And it has fruited the last 2 years for most of our customers, because we did get a little over 300 hours. And it's an awful good peach on top of that. And whenever you see it in bloom, you know it's a Red Baron, because you see this peach tree and it's totally red. They just stand out. All the other peach trees are more pink. They're all pretty, but we did have one peach tree back in the 80s called Bonita Peach, which, of course, Bonita means pretty. But when it bloomed, it was the ugliest peach tree I've ever seen. It didn't have petals. I hadn't seen a peach tree that ugly before. The petalage was really just brownish, grayish petals. We couldn't believe it, but it had. Now, that was the best peach tree I'd ever grown taste-wise, but it needed about 350 hours, so we no longer carry that one. Although, you know, we'll fruit here in canyons, but it was pretty bad. Didn't leave room for the last peach's donut. The original donut peach, which is a flat peach with white flesh. Oh, Red Baron's yellow also. It probably needs 350 plus hours. I've grown that for over 10 years. Never got more than a few fruit per year, so I don't think it. People keep asking for it, so we carry it. We don't carry many. I think we might have this one left for this year, because it just hasn't fruited that well for most areas of Orange County. But it does ripen in July, so it is a really good tasting peach. But generally, we don't recommend it highly. So August Pride and Mid Pride are two best sellers. Although I do have a lot of people who go after tropic snow. And if you want a white peach, that's easily the best white peach. We might carry Babcock in. Babcock needs about this much chill. It was our best-selling peach in the 70s and 80s, but I'll have to revisit and see if it actually will work well out here. Because that's an awful good peach too that ripens in July. Okay, that's the peaches. Now the nectarines, and we'll include the Nectaplum. So the spicy Nectaplum that we sell is apparently a hybrid between plums and nectarines, but I can't. And the literature says you can taste the plum in it. I can't. I mean, I've grown that for several years, and the tree looks like a nectarine, except the leaves are purple, and the fruit looks like a red-skinned white nectarine. And when I eat it, it's just a really good nectarine. I can't taste the plum in it. I haven't met anyone yet who can taste the plum in it, yet the Dave Wilson literature says you can easily taste the plum in it. But I just can't. So we include it with the nectarines because it's probably our best, quote, nectarine we can grow. So the nectarines go by low chill. There's Desert Delight, which this is. So it's already in bloom. So the chill is definitely less than 200 hours because we got up to maybe 140, 150 before the last heat wave, which pushed us back down below 100. And now I think we're back up to 150. But Desert Delight, less than 200 hours. It's a yellow flesh. And it ripens early to mid-June. So not bad, not bad. And at least it can make it into early summer. But it would be better quality if it was later than that. Then there's the Atomic, I don't know who named this thing. Atomic Red, flowering, white nectarine. I mean, that sounds like a name out of the 60s. Atomic Red Flower. Now, it does have a show like the Red Baron. It's the only nectarine we've seen with double red flowers. The chill on it seems to be perhaps 250. I don't know. My daughter has it in Santa Ana at her house. It's bloomed the last 2 years really well and fruited really well. And one of our other customers a few years before that told us it fruited really well in Los Angeles. So it doesn't seem to need that much chill. The literature from Dave Wilson says 500 hours. We know it's not 500 because it hasn't missed a year. So we're still trying to figure out, we think it may be 250. And it ripens late June into early July. So that's actually, and it's white. So it's actually pretty darn good. Unfortunately, the plants we get are like this tall with stems about this thick. And Dave Wilson hasn't even made proper signs for them yet. So they're sitting out there next to our spicy Nectaplum, really small trees about this big. Again, by the end of the year, they'll be over your head in height. But this may turn out to be one of our best nectarines. Now, 20 years ago, Snow Queen was the top one. Of course, we had more chill. It's right around 300 hours, or maybe a little more than 300 hours, and it ripens late June. So for a long time, Snow Queen was number one. There's another one that is around the same hours as Atomic. Wait, it's called Arctic Star. And we used to grow that one, but Arctic Star ripens mid-June, a week before Snow Queen, and we figure, okay, instead of carrying both of them that are very similar in quality and all that, we'll go for the one that ripens later. To get more sun and heat on them. And then there's Double Delight. Which is over 300 hours, maybe 325 or so. But it ripens mid-July. So if we get the chill, this is the best nectarine we can get, that we can grow. It is a yellow flesh. It is rated one of the highest quality nectarines, but we can't grow it every year unless you live again by a big major river and a canyon. And it does have, the double light is called because it's got a double pink flower. So it's a real good bloomer if we get the chill. Now the spicy Nectaplum, the chill on it is less than 300. It probably should be fit in right about here. It is the white flesh. It ripens mid-July. I would say mid to late July. So it's coming in at the best possible time. It is a white nectarine, or to me it's a white nectarine. It is very unusual in that the flowers are not this shell pink. They're a lot larger and they're a mauve pink. The literature says purplish pink. I don't think they're purple at all, but they're definitely not a shell pink. They're more of a mauve pink and they're bigger. So nice flower show. They're not double, they're single, but they're big. And then the new growth is plum purple. And the leaves stay purple until midsummer, and then they go to a kind of a dull green at that point. So a very ornamental tree as far as that goes too, that makes really good fruit. Again, all these can suffer from thrip damage on the skin, so make sure you spray them when they're blooming. Any questions on the nectarines? Okay. We still have all these in stock, so someone bought a lot of Desert Delights yesterday when we were closing, so we may be low in this one, but that's, we have a lot of spices in there. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.